Okay, I think we'll get ready to go ahead and get started. We're so excited about today. I want to welcome everyone to another session of our University of Louisiana Systems Pathways to Grant Success webinars. I'm Carla Howell. I'm the Director of the Office of Sponsored Programs at Northwestern State University, and I'm your UL System Research and Grants Content Expert. Very excited about our session today. So we're going to have the pleasure of having our very own Deputy Commissioner for Research and Sponsored Initiatives from the Board of Regents as our presenter, Ms. Carrie Robinson. Today we'll be giving an inside perspective of the Board of Regents Support Fund's Research and Development Program. Once again, we're going to request that during the presentation, you type your questions in the Q&A section on your screen, and we'll address those at the end of the session and possibly throughout the session if it's related to what the current discussion is. Today's session is being recorded, so please contact me for a link to the recording. At the end, we'll have a link in the chat box with a few questions for some feedback on our presentation. The feedback that I've been getting is what's helped drive these sessions that we're having, so we certainly appreciate you taking a few minutes for that. I want to go ahead and let you know that we have scheduled a webinar highlighting the Enhancement Fund Program for May 18th at 10 a.m., so be on the lookout for those details. And now it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter, Carrie Robinson. It's all yours, Carrie.
All right. Thanks so much, Carla, and thanks to the UL System for having us. We are always delighted to talk about the Board of Regents Support Fund funding opportunities. I would like to introduce Brian Jones to you. He is currently our enhancement program manager, but in a month he will be transitioning to senior grants program administrator, and he will have oversight over all of our grants programs. So he is here today to listen in and get read in on the R&D programs after Zenobia Simmons left us at the end of this fiscal year funding cycle. So Brian, you will get a lot more of in May when he does the enhancement session for you, but you will also see Brian in R&D context going forward. So with that, what I'm going to start with is just a quick overview of where the money comes from for the Board of Regents Support Fund and what we're charged to do. It's really helpful, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the presentation, to have a good framework for what the money is for and how the state has provided the money, so that you know as you're writing proposals how you need to write those proposals to meet our needs and our expectations. So the Board of Regents Support Fund is established in the Louisiana Constitution. It was established in 1986. Our first funding was in 1987-88. And what the Constitution does is charges us to reach two goals, and they are framed as equal: improve the quality of higher education and enhance economic development in Louisiana. So when you look at our RFPs, you'll notice that all of our RFPs refer to economic development. Sometimes people have questions as to why we bother with the economic development component. We bother with it because the Constitution says that we are required to do it. And it's a good idea generally, but it is required. Expenditures are permitted for any or all of the following activities. We can spend money in these areas and only in these areas. They are carefully defined research efforts. That's what we're here to talk about today. Endowment of chairs for eminent scholars, enhancement of the quality of academic research or agricultural departments or units within a post-secondary institution, and recruitment of superior graduate students. Within these programs, we operate 9 different programs. 8 of them are competitive, and only 1, endowed professorships, is non-competitive. The ones that you see in red are endowment programs. What these programs do is they take a private sector, a non-state contribution, and we match that contribution to create an endowment that exists in perpetuity. So we're not going to talk very much about those today, but your campuses, all of your campuses have numerous of these endowments on the campus. We have funded more than 3,200 endowments across the state since the inception of the programs. The blue that you see is R&D. These are the 4 programs we'll be talking about in some depth. Research Competitiveness subprogram, the Industrial Ties subprogram, those are long-standing. They've existed since the beginning of the support fund. The Proof of Concept and Prototyping Initiative and Awards to Louisiana Artists and Scholars, or ATLAS. And then at the base of the triangle, you see, because the work of enhancement is foundational, you'll see our enhancement program grant activities, including departmental enhancement and the BOR SREB program, as well as our federal matching. The support fund is the source of federal match for statewide federal programs such as the big NSF Track 1, NASA EPSCoR, and so on. So that's the context. That's what the support fund is in Globo. And we'll talk much more about our R&D opportunities. So the support fund supports all academic and workforce disciplines. We do not have any restrictions on the disciplines across the support fund as a whole, but we do have restrictions within individual programs, and we'll get to those. And we support a lot of different kinds of activities. Within these are the 4 R&D sub-programs. We have invested about $175 million over the life of the support fund in grant support just in the R&D programs. In total, the support fund has provided almost $1 billion in direct support to institutions, and the endowments have valuation well over $1 billion. Other support fund programs, it's important to think about this in the context of R&D, because R&D can't be all things to all people. But our other programs provide support that is essential to R&D activities across campuses. We purchase equipment, supplies through departmental enhancement. We provide faculty and student support, often through endowments, but also through grant programs. And all of these expenditures have a significant impact on R&D activities. Grant programs with dedicated support, as I said, RCS, ITRS, POCP, and ATLAS. Those are the 4 programs that are direct support for research efforts. So we'll go through them one by one and just talk a little bit about what is expected in each. And I'm going to give you keywords for each of the 4 sub-programs. So the things that you need to keep front of mind if you're thinking about applying to these programs. The first is RCS, Research Competitiveness. The program goal is to help faculty who are near competitiveness for federal research dollars to overcome barriers and secure federal funds. That's what we want to accomplish. And the keywords here are secure federal funds. So your research area, to be competitive in RCS, your research area has to be in an area that the federal government, the federal agencies are funding. If you have a really good idea, but the feds are not interested in it, do not provide resources in that area, it's not going to be competitive in RCS. The other keyword is overcome barriers. So we ask you in RCS proposals to tell us why you're not already competitive for federal dollars. What barriers do you face? To identify those and to talk about how 1 to 3 years of RCS funding will help you overcome those barriers. Unsuccessful proposals often don't identify barriers because we have trouble talking about challenges that we face. We'd rather put a positive spin on things and talk about how great things are, but overcoming barriers and identifying those barriers, being realistic about those barriers is really important in this program, and talking about how RCS funding is going to get you over that hump and get you to federal funding and federal competitiveness. In terms of eligibility, STEM disciplines are eligible, including the social sciences, and the competition is open to faculty who are not yet competitive for federal research funding or who are changing research directions and are not funded in their new research directions. It's important with changing research directions to note that even in the RFP, that is a lesser priority. Faculty who are not yet competitive for federal funds are a higher priority than faculty changing research directions. In terms of funding and duration, up to $200,000 for a 3-year research project that's split across the 3 years, not $200,000 per year. For the 1-year awards, these are much smaller awards for projects with a very near-term federal promise, a small barrier to overcome. So funding's up to $20,000. It's important to note RCS is not an equipment program. It is not designed to purchase research equipment. It will only allow the purchase of research equipment when it's necessary for the specific project requested, and the match that the institution has to match 25% of the total equipment cost in cash. So if you request a $100,000 piece of equipment from the support fund for your RCS project, the campus has to provide $25,000 in cash toward the purchase of that piece of equipment. You can only request $75,000 from the Board of Regents. Project types, we're going to move from the more basic, more fundamental kinds of research projects through to the more applied and more market-ready research projects as we move through these programs. So with RCS, basic and applied research that's linked to federal priorities for funding. So this is the broadest and most basic of our research programs. In terms of the competitions, what does it look like when you apply to these programs? All of our programs are very competitive, but RCS this year had an unusual year. Typically, the success rate in RCS, you'll see the success rate in the current year competition was 33%. Typically, the success rate is closer to 20. We only received 92 proposals. We usually receive between 125, and we've had as many as 200 in a competition. We don't know if this is a trend or a pandemic hiccup. But certainly when you go into this kind of competition, it's better to go in assuming that we're funding 1 in 5. And even with a success rate of 33%, you have to remember that we're funding 1 of 3 projects sent to us. So projects are highly competitive, the program is highly competitive, and we have a finite amount of money. So note that the 33% success rate is by project. We funded 29% of the money that was requested. So it's a competitive program, but not as competitive as it has been in years past. We don't know if that's a hiccup or a trend. The next program is Industrial Ties, ITRS. The key in Industrial Ties, the keywords are partnerships and economic development. The whole purpose of this program is to build partnerships between researchers and business and industry related to Louisiana economic development. To this end, you are required to have in-cash or in-kind match from the industry partner, that the partner is going to have to confirm the match and re-up the match if the project is funded. Each year, we ask for a new letter from the industry partner or partners reiterating the match and confirming that that match is going to be there. In terms of eligibility, we are focused on the target areas for Louisiana economic development. That's why it is more restricted than RCS. So advanced manufacturing and materials, clean technology and energy, coastal and water management, digital media and enterprise software, life sciences and bioengineering are the 5 areas that both the Board of Regents and the state have identified as high priorities for economic development. But ITRS does have a provision wherein if you have a project in any other area that has strong promise for short-term economic development in the state, you can propose that project. It comes with the same restrictions in terms of you have to have an industry partner with in-cash, in-kind match. So you don't get out from under that, but you can make that request. In terms of funding, they're up to 3-year projects, up to $250,000. Again, that's net across the 3 years of the project. You must have the match in cash or in kind, and you will be required to confirm it. The equipment matching provision is the same as an RCS. These are not equipment purchase programs. These are more hands-on research programs with equipment as an ancillary request. Project types, basic or applied research. Again, it has to be a research project. It can't be a partnership project to do other things. It has to have a primary research component, and it has to be related to industry needs, and it has to contribute to economic development. Competition profile, this program is much, much smaller than RCS. We only received 26 proposals this year, requesting a little over 2 million, 2.36 million. We've recommended funding for 6 projects for a total of 480,000, success rate of 23%. Part of the reason this program is smaller is because of the industry partner requirement. But the program this is about right for this program in terms of past history. We receive about between 25 and 35 projects a year. We fund between 6 and 9, and the success rate usually hovers around 20 to 25%. Proof of concept and prototyping. This is an initiative within the ITRS program, but it is reviewed separately and it has a separate scoring rubric. Please note that when we release RFPs in the fall, you should absolutely race to read the RFP and make sure you look at the scoring rubrics. They are at the back, or the evaluation rubrics there at the back of every RFP that we publish, so that you know what we're looking at, how we're prioritizing, how we're telling panelists what to look for. So POCP, this is really exactly what it says. If you are doing a proof of concept, doing work, doing prototyping work on a product or a service that is very close to the market, then this is the program for you. This is focusing on commercialization of your research in the near term. It has the same eligibility as ITRS. Funding is only 1 year because we are looking at very near term final work on a product or service available to the market, up to $40,000 with the same equipment restrictions. And in terms of project type, we're only looking at proof of concept and prototype development with commercialization, tech transfer potential. For these kinds of proposals, it's extremely important to show where the market is for the project that you're working on. Who's going to commercialize it? Who's going to use it? Where's the demand for it? And the more, you're not required to have an industry partner, but the more support you can show from industry, the better your project is going to fare. In terms of the competition, this is the smallest that we offer. It's also the narrowest R&D program that we offer because it's so laser focused on proof of concept and prototyping work. This year we received 12 proposals, 3 projects were funded, 25% success rate. That is very small even for POCP. POCP is traditionally around 18 to 21 proposals submitted, and significantly higher money. So this is what you see here is similar to RCS. For some reason, there's a shrinking in the pool, and we don't know if this is a hiccup or a trend. You will also notice, I'll just go back very quickly. If you look at the 3 projects funded and you're doing your math, you'll notice that each of them was funded for almost $40,000. In the other programs in R&D and generally, you can receive budget cuts. Typically in POCP, there are not big budget cuts. You tend to get right around $40,000 because it's a very small, that's true for 1-year RCS as well. It's a very small pool of money. And you generally can show that you need all of the funds that you're requesting to do the work. Finally, we'll move to Atlas, Awards to Louisiana Artists and Scholars. This program is fairly unique. We don't know of other programs in state-run programs like this. This is the one opportunity we have in the whole support fund that is earmarked for arts, humanities, and social sciences. So only arts, humanities, and social sciences are eligible to participate. And the projects we're looking for are projects in those disciplines, and it is discipline-based, not faculty expertise-based. If you're a scientist who writes plays like we have had in the past in Atlas, you are perfectly eligible to apply for Atlas, but you have to be applying for the play and not for your science work. We are looking for projects that are close to completion, and projects that are major scholarly or artistic works that are likely to have a significant impact, either on your field of study or on the general public. We have funded all kinds of things through Atlas, from scholarly monographs to novels, to film projects, recording projects, fine arts, gallery exhibitions. So this is a pretty wide open program within the eligible disciplines. We provide up to $50,000. The projects are all 1 year because we're focused again on near-term completion. And Atlas, funnily this year, is the most competitive of our competitive R&D programs. We have 50 proposals. That's actually low for Atlas. We have received as many as 80. requesting $2 million, $2.1 million, 9 projects were funded. The success rate is only 18%. So instead of the 1 in 3 applicants who are funded in RCS and Atlas, it's 1 in 5. I just want to briefly go through our competitive process so you know sort of what it looks like from the beginning to the end of the process. We are right now at this moment in time at almost the very end of our annual process. So around July 1st, as close to July 1st as I can get it, we release our request for proposals for the coming fiscal year. The requests for proposals include guidelines for submission, criteria for review, and scoring rubrics. I would strongly encourage you to put the date on your calendar if you're interested in applying so that you can pull down those RFPs as soon as possible and start looking at what we're looking for, what our program offerings are in the year, and how you might want to respond. We do have a long Q&A period. Brian and I the support fund staff is small but mighty. We have 3.5 people who staff the whole support fund. Brian and I are now going to be the Q&A people, but we have a long Q&A period from the time the RFPs are released until October 15th. We will offer a central webinar on the whole support fund. We will do staff sessions with PIs. We will take your calls. We will take your emails. We'll talk to campuses if campuses want to invite us in to do a session like this or individual meetings with their PIs. We will do that. So we do all kinds of things to make sure you get all the information that you need to respond appropriately to the RFP. Proposal submissions are generally in very late October and into November, with notices of intent in the research and development programs due in September and October. September for the STEM programs, October for Atlas. External reviews, all of our programs, all of our grant programs are reviewed by out-of-state experts who have no conflicts of interest. So after your proposal comes in, we need a bit of time because we're getting our panels in, and the panels are not from here, and they're reading your proposals to get us funding recommendations. Consultant reports follow the external reviews. We publish reports in all of our competitive programs. Those generally go up right at the beginning of April. This year we published on April 1st, and we try to get as close to that date as we can. The reports will have an introduction that includes an assessment of the program, if there are any recommendations for the program or general recommendations. It will assess proposals, typically just the proposals that are recommended for funding, and provide funding recommendations to the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents does have to act on funding recommendations. They do that at their April meeting, which happens to be tomorrow. But what the board is doing by acting is not choosing projects. They are ratifying the process that we followed to get to the projects that are recommended for funding. The consultant reports are essentially the final word on what is recommended for funding, or what is ultimately going to be funded. And finally, at the end, in May and June, we contract the successful projects and we debrief the unsuccessful projects. What that means is everybody who submits a proposal to us gets comments. Everybody, whether you win or lose, you get comments. So debriefing we generally do after the competition is over, and we do it to the individual PI through their Logan account and not as part of a published report. So that's our process, and we run from July to the end of June, and then we start it all over again every year. Deadlines for submission. You might want to mark your calendars if you intend to submit too, because we cannot extend these deadlines. An RFP has what Louisiana calls the force of law, which means unless something happens, like has happened recently, unfortunately, natural disasters that cause us to move deadlines, we cannot extend these deadlines at all. Our deadlines are 4:30 p.m. local time on the date that you see on the slide in front of you, September 12th, with a full proposal November 7th for the big R&D, STEM R&D programs, October 10th, November 21st for Atlas. All right, I'm going to pause for a second, Carla, and see if you have any questions in the chat that you'd like to share out.
We have not had any. We had someone asking about the link to the video, but other than that, there's been nothing at this time.
All right, well, I'll keep on plowing ahead. So the second part of the presentation, I just want to focus a little bit on how you succeed in our competitions and really almost any grant program competition. This is not particular to us. A lot of this will sound like common sense, but as Brian can tell you, Brian and I combined have, I counted 37 years of experience doing this. We have seen almost everything, though people tend to come up with something new every year. It's very interesting. But we've seen a lot, and we know that just underscoring these points can make a huge difference as people prepare for the competitions. So how do you succeed? First, you have to think about this as a highly competitive process. We fund between 1 and 3 and 1 and 5. So many more people are going to be disappointed than are happy. So how do you approach that process? First, don't get discouraged, be persistent, apply early, apply often, and try to listen when panels tell you about what they saw in your projects. Try to listen even when you disagree with them, even when you think that they don't know what they're talking about. Try to listen and understand what they're saying to you, but be persistent. If you don't win the first time, apply again. Learn from your mistakes or your not mistakes and apply again. Awareness, if you don't know what opportunities are out there, you won't be able to apply for them. So make sure that you know what funding opportunities are there. Make sure you know what kinds of projects works, and we will help you with this. The support fund staff will provide copies of successful proposals. We have 10 years of competitive review results available on our website, so you can dig through consultant reports to see what they're looking at and how they're judging projects. You can find projects that look like they might speak to what you want to do, and you can ask us for copies. And you can read through those copies and either use them as models or just use them to get a sense of how a good proposal flows. Finally, you can ask questions to program managers. Brian and I are available by phone, by email. You can reach out to us at any time and we will try to answer your questions. We also keep the Q&A list, which I'll give you a link to at the end of the presentation. We keep a live Q&A list on our website. So if you ask questions to us in the cycle, you can go to that Q&A page a couple of days later and you might see that question. If it's a new question for us, you might see it appear there. But that Q&A list is also always available to you just to read through, to poke through and see what kind of questions other people have asked and what kind of answers they've gotten. Obedience is a big one, and it's one that people tend to think least about. You have to follow the rules of the program. You have to, we release an RFP, we don't write it for our health. It contains guidelines for writing a successful proposal. Often it'll tell you what exactly the proposal needs to contain and in what order. One of the reasons it's very important to follow the rules is with external consultants, when they are looking at our RFP, which they get along with all of the proposals, what they're looking at is the rules that we give them. If you have something dramatically out of order, or you decide that something doesn't apply to you and you don't want to include that part of the proposal, or you're not comfortable with what would be in that part of the proposal, they're going to note that as an absence. If they have to poke around and look for things that can be hard for them, because they're often reviewing big stacks of proposals and this is not their day job. So following the guidance we give you makes it easier. And in a highly competitive process, when panels start to see lots of mistakes, lots of things out of order, or things that don't fit with what the RFP is asking for, that can score you down. Brian likes to say, panels generally break things into 3 piles: a yes pile, a no pile, and a maybe pile. And you really don't want to be in the maybe pile because they've got questions. And finally, empathy. And I'm going to talk about this on the next slide. What every party to the transaction wants and needs. So there are 3 parties to every transaction that the support fund does. There is the applicant, the person who is submitting the proposal, who has a project to do and wants and needs around that project. There is the campus. All of our projects are funded through the campus and contracted to the campus. The campus has things it wants and needs from its research operation, departmental priorities, departmental opportunities that are being pursued. So understanding how the individual project fits within that larger universe is important, but it's also important to keep in mind the funding agency priorities. We have programs, we are charged to do certain things with the support funds. Each of our programs is organized around its own goal, and knowing what that goal is and showing how your project speaks to that goal and fulfills that goal is very important. One of the most unfortunate things that we can see in a competition is a really good, really interesting project that doesn't fit the program. The panels will say, this is a very good, very interesting project and we love it and it's great, but we can't fund it because it does not meet the brief. So making sure that your project fits within, that you understand the relationships between what the project needs, what the campus needs and wants, and what the funding agency is looking for is good practice as you work through just designing your project and then writing up the proposal. 3 components of a good proposal and a good work plan. You have to think sort of before, during, and after. Where are you right now? How is your idea aligned with what's going on your campus and with us? That's what I just talked about. Why do you need what you're saying you need? What's the importance of what you say you need? So that's before, thinking about where you are right now. During the project, you'll need to describe in a work plan, what's it going to look like in year 1, year 2, year 3? What benchmarks, what goals are you seeking to accomplish in each year of the project, so that the panels can follow along and say, this is a reasonable work plan for year 1, this is a reasonable outcome. And then finally, after the project, how do we end up better than where we were before at the end of this project? For RCS, obviously, the answer for that may be, I have my federal grant. This has positioned me to be highly successful in whichever agency is funding the kind of work I do. For Atlas, it might be I can hold up a copy of my book and give a copy to the Board of Regents. We always enjoy receiving copies of books. But defining the importance of your project in terms of its completion, how you plan to finish it, and how, in the case, this is particularly true for something like RCS, where you're looking for competitiveness on a consistent basis in federal awards, how what you're doing is sustainable, because soft money is soft money, it will go away. So how is what you're going to do, should it end at the end of 3 years, or how are you going to sustain the work at the end of the 3-year period? Always remember, as you are writing your proposal, that you're writing for people who don't live here and who aren't on Louisiana campuses and are not necessarily fully read into the particulars of your department, your unit, your context. So making sure that you align with the RFP, making sure you show them that you know what the RFP is looking for, because that's what they've been hired to do. Is they've been hired to review projects that are submitted to a specific program with specific guidelines. Make sure, again, that you look at the scoring rubrics in the RFPs. Those will tell you a lot about what the panel will be looking for when they read through a project. Strong arguments rooted in the purposes, goals, and objectives of the funding. So strong arguments are really important, but you have to make sure that they articulate with what we're looking for. Make sure you explain your context, because they are not necessarily going to know. So contexts that are particularly important for your project. For example, if your department is pushing hard in a specific research area and there are multiple teams working on a specific research area, and your project is part of that larger context, explaining that to the consultants will be very helpful. Making sure you know how you're aligned with what your campus is looking for is very important. Campus role, scope, mission, strategic priorities. Having a plan to complete your project at a high level of quality, and having a sustainability plan when it's appropriate. Really, really important. One of the unfortunate things is when a strong project comes in that's very well defined, but the work plan is basically, I'll do the work. Making sure that they can actually look through your work plan and say, yes, this is a reasonable amount of work for the amount of time budgeted, for the amount of, say, summer salary or release that's requested, making sure that they can see how that plan actually lines up with the budget and lines up with project goals. Really important. And make sure that you include the data and the context for the data. If you have data that speaks to the importance, the significance of your project, writing a narrative that is general and says this is important and good and high quality is not nearly as impactful as including the significant data so that they can see how it's needed, what's the long-term value, what are the outputs, and so on. So anytime you can illustrate with a specific example, but better than sort of an off-the-cuff example is data, especially in STEM programs, because those guys are all about the data. So just in summary, winning the competitions, you should show clear and meaningful alignment with the RFP and with department, campus, and unit priorities. You should absolutely know when you submit that project that you have answered all the questions in the RFP and that you have shown how your project is of value to the campus on which you will be doing the work. Emphasize need, impact, quality, and sustainability. Need and impact are maybe the most important things. Why do you need it now, and what's gonna come out of it at the end? Anticipate questions, concerns, and challenges. This is, again, gets to that maybe stack. Make sure that you are thinking as you read through as a third-party reader, what kind of questions might a reviewer have about this, and make sure you answer those questions. Don't make broad statements or generalizations that aren't supported, because a question gets you closer to the maybe pile. If they don't quite understand how things are coming together, they have a concern about something. For R&D, you don't identify your challenges enough. You don't have your barriers specifically identified. For RCS, challenges maybe in working with industry partners or in finding a marketplace for your proof of concept work. All of those things, even if it feels a little uncomfortable to talk about things that may not go quite right, that's better than leaving an open question out there for the panel to pick up on. So what would happen if you were lucky enough to win? You're lucky enough to be one of those 1 in 3 or 1 in 5. What we do in terms of post-award, there's a contract. The contract between the Board of Regents and the campus and your system for the publics. We will release those contracts as soon as we can after the board takes action at its April meeting. We will require that they come back to us by toward the end of May, and then we will negotiate out the budgets and all of that. In terms of developing your budget, when a project is recommended for funding, the reviewers will write an assessment of the project and might have funding stipulations that say, we will recommend this for funding, but we don't recommend the $3,000 supply budget. We recommend $2,000. We don't recommend the travel budget at all. We recommend less or more in graduate students. And when they write that down in a comment on a project, it becomes a stipulation to the project. So we will look at those stipulations. You have to comply with those. We'll also look at any of the match that was pledged and any of the match that's required and make sure that that all lines up. We will go in detail through your budget and budget justification to make sure everything is as it should be. And then we pay in advance. We try to clear all the money out of our budget by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. So we will pay 100% in advance on the one-year projects to your campus, and the campus will keep your grant account. For multi-year projects, we keep a 15% retainage year over year, and you get that at the beginning of the next year when your annual report has been received and approved. You are required to do annual and final project and financial reports on any funded grant project. And major changes generally require support fund or board staff approval. That's all specified in the contract, and your offices of sponsored programs will help you with that. How do you get the information and the RFPs that I have talked so much about? Go to our website. One caveat, this year we will be looking pretty hard at the R&D RFPs and thinking about ways we might want to change them up a little bit. So you might want to hold off on the detailed read of the R&D RFPs. The general scope of the programs is going to stay the same, but the RFPs themselves and the requirements may change somewhat. So be on the lookout for those in early July, somewhere around July, the first week of July. You can go to our website and download the RFPs for this cycle at any point. If you have questions, please reach out to us. We are always available. You can send questions directly to Brian. You can send questions to me. You can send questions to our ticket system. You can also request proposal copies through the ticket system at rsi@laregents.edu, or you can call us up. We are in the office quite a bit these days, so feel free to give us a call on the Regents phone. And for Q&A lists and technical support, the Q&As are always available on our website, and they're updated throughout the question and answer period, usually within 24 hours. So you can look at those. And if you have technical issues, all of our proposals are submitted through our custom Logan system, which is our grants automation network. So if you have technical issues, getting a Logan account, getting into your Logan account, or any other problems, you can email the ticket system at rsi@laregents.edu, and we will help you out with that. So with that, Carla, that's all I have. Any questions?
I think that was a lot. Okay, take a breath. Okay, we do have 2 questions that have popped up in the chat. The first one is asking, could you share the 2022 submission deadlines once more, please?
Absolutely, happy to go back up to that. Okay, deadlines for submission, and we are a cyclical group. We run on cycles, so these deadlines only change when one of them falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday. Notices of intent for RCS, ITRS, and POCP is September 12th, full proposal due November 7th. For Atlas, the NOI is October 10th, full proposal due November 21st. The submission modules in Logan are generally released after the RFPs by maybe a couple of weeks, but they're out by the end of July as a certainty. So if you don't see them there as soon as the RFP goes out, that's just because they generally lag a bit because they're being custom designed based on our needs.
Great. Okay, one other question is for STEM. How essential is multiple collaborations? A new one at this time.
That's an interesting question. For STEM research programs, generally, we do require that you select. We have a discipline rotation for RCS. There are no rotations in the other programs. It just is what it is. But you do have to select a primary discipline, but because multidisciplinary research and cross-cutting research is a trend, and particularly a trend in federal funding agencies, it's not necessarily important for the success of a project, but it's well understood by panels that these projects are very likely to be cross-cutting. That's probably not as clear as you wanted, but you do have to, the basic message is you do have to select a primary discipline for eligibility, but that primary discipline doesn't foreclose the opportunity to be a highly collaborative project across disciplines.
Okay. I think that's it. We've had a couple of questions. The recording will be posted on my content experts page on the systems website, and I believe Caitlin and Katie have put a link to that in the chat, so you may want to take that link and copy it. the PowerPoint. We may also, we'll try to have it on there also. And I guess that's about it. That was a lot of information. I haven't given a minute or two to see if anybody else is typing any questions, but sure want to thank everybody for today. Carrie, thank you so much. I mean, this is just very helpful knowledge and guidance and just invaluable.
And
for
please,
those that are
I'll
looking
just
for-
reiterate as my last word, we are here to help. That is part of our role at the Board of Regents, is to help applicants navigate this process. So please reach out if you have questions that come up or questions you don't want to ask in front of the whole group. Reach out to either Brian or me. We'll be more than happy to help.
You want to flip back to that last slide with your contact information on it for those who may want to just grab that. There you go. And of course, your my cohorts at your sponsored research offices at each institution can also, give you some information and help you with that, and put it together if you have some questions. She's got the link for the feedback over here. I haven't seen any other questions pop up. A whole lot of thank yous. Some great information, Carrie. Great information. Don't forget to watch for our next session. We're going to do a panel type discussion session with Brian, and we've got that scheduled for 10 a.m. I believe on May 18th. So we'll be sending out registrations for that. So I'd like to remind everyone to be watching for that. And guess we hope to see you then. That's it. Carrie, thank you. Brian, thank you. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks to everybody.
You'll be getting lots of
You too,
questions
Carla.
in this. We really appreciate you.
All right.